Thank you all. Thank you in particular, Enmei, for the, um, you know, for bringing us together in chanting the gata and opening the sutra. Um, on some level, I have nothing to add to that. And yet, on the schedule, I'm asked to say a few things, so maybe I'll say a few things. It's wonderful just looking through the pictures and the images, so many faces that I know and have met before and have practiced with before, and how wonderful also many faces of people who I have not seen. So my name is Kenkō. I'm a senior student at the Village Zendo, but I actually live in Northampton, Massachusetts. So I'm not usually around at the physical space of the Village Zendo in New York, but I often get to practice during the longer retreats in the winter, in the summer with many of you. I noticed by looking at myself on the mirror, it's like you can see that there is sort of another layer underneath underneath the usual black layer, which it's a beautiful bright winter day up here in Northampton where I am. So I bundle up because I'm easily cold, and it was like a total revelation to me just a few years ago that I don't have to be cold. I can just put on more clothing. And it was like, I don't know, I had never, the thought had never occurred to me. And this morning it was very interesting. We usually have our Sunday morning sit here at Soto Zen in Northampton. So I pack my stuff. The sit starts at 8 in the morning, so it's early, and I schlep my stuff down to the car, drive down, and I noticed that there's ice on the windshield. And then it turns out that the ice on the windshield was actually on the inner side of the windshield. Right? And it's like a moment of like being stunned into what do I do now? Do I take the scraper and scrape the inside? Do I just put the vent on? It's sort of a moment of oh, this is a moment of being stunned, right? Saying this is this right now is not what I expected. And if we're fortunate, that's a moment of letting go of our ideas, of our preconceptions, and really open up to what is actually here and to what feels appropriate. And there's a lot on my heart too. If you look at the news, wars in Ukraine continuing, Middle East continuing, the new incoming administration foreshadowing what it might be like for the next months and years. And it's also the solstice, the moment when it's here in the northern hemisphere at least, it's sort of the time of the longest night, really of the deepest dark, the shortest day. It's a still point when the sun is above the peak of Capricorn in the southern hemisphere. And it's like it goes down, and then it slowly comes back up again. So it seems fitting and appropriate that we as humans too hold still, become quiet, turn our light inward so that we can get to know the dark. There's a beautiful poem by Wendell Berry. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's called To Know the Dark. He writes, "To go in the dark with a light is to know the light. To know the dark, go dark. Go without sight and find that the dark too blooms and sings and is traveled by dark feet and dark wings." Let me read it again. To go in the dark with a light is to know the light. To know the dark, go dark. Go without sight and find that the dark too blooms and sings and is traveled by dark feet and dark wings. The last line is traveled by dark feet and dark wings. It reminds me of, Kinhin on retreat. Like the feet, you just follow the dark shape in front of you. And without even knowing it, there's communication and there's a kind of synchronicity that happens. So our winter retreat is coming up when we have a chance to go dark, to enter into silence and stillness, and to do so in community. For a little while to go dark and go without sight. So that perhaps we might find out that the dark too blooms and sings. And I love that part of the going dark is just turn off the cell phone. Notifications, go dark. And to feel the moment of, oh, but, what is it like to let that go dark and let that go quiet too? Not forever, just for a few days. And be able to see the urges that might suddenly come up in yourself. And so what might it be like to go dark on retreat or in our homes? Maybe there is some space that you can create for yourself. Tune in to the talks. Find some space perhaps for Zazen, taking some walks. What would it mean to go without sight? I remember being on Sesshin some years ago, and during the first few days when it's like the body is just tired and achy, and the mind is tired and exhausted, but not quite exhausted enough to really let go. Um, and in that situation, the smallest thing can really bloom into like a big thing. I forget what was going on in my mind or what the specific circumstances were, but I remember at some point it's like, being all upset and angry, and it's like, oh, the people who organized the retreat, this is really all wrong, and they shouldn't, and they blah blah blah, and they all, and I'm like totally, I'm like totally in this, right? I have a speech prepared, and really, really enjoying the energy and the juiciness and the self-righteousness of that, and It's like, oh, I'm going to go up, and in the middle of the sit, I'm going to go up and go out and go to my car and drive home. That will teach them. And that was sort of the moment when I sort of when I noticed what was going on, right? It's like, that will teach them. It's like, well, what's that going to teach them? You know? And somehow they had failed to read my mind and arrange everything to make it just the perfect retreat for me. You know? And I remember at later retreats of finding myself in exactly the kind of sort of energetic space. It's like, angry self-righteousness, you know? And that's when it occurred to me, it's like, this is interesting. Circumstances change in a particular way, and then this is what comes up for me. Yeah. And 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 then there was the space to become curious and to say, is this how I tend to react when I feel pressed? When things don't go the way I think that they should be going? Is that, I think Joko Beck called it our chief feature. It's like the deeply ingrained ways that we have learned, maybe for good reasons, to behave, to react when things are not going our way. And it may look many different ways, right? Maybe that is, maybe that means, starting to boss around other people. Fortunately, on the retreat with the silence, there is sort of, the space is a little bit limited for bossing around, but there is opportunity for trying to boss people around, right? When somebody doesn't do what they're supposed to do in the moment, or they're not paying attention in the way that they should be paying attention. Or maybe it's getting angry, which was sort of what I observed for myself. It's like everybody else is to blame for the fact that I'm not perfectly comfortable right now. And they should fix this. And they should have fixed it long time ago. Or maybe it is, trying to please everyone. To think, maybe we have learned in order to be okay and to avoid conflict, we have to do what we can to make other people happy, as if we could. Or maybe we need to be the star of the show and, really shine and be seen as competent and, the greatest Zen person who ever lived. Or our strategy might be to withdraw. It's like this is too much. And I think on Zen retreats that it can feel like there is the space to withdraw, because in a way nobody, it's like, well, you're silent anyway, you're still anyway. So it may feel like an appropriate reaction, but keep an eye open for that, if that is what you do, and take advantage of the interviews with the teachers. So for me, Sesshin is really, it was like an artificially structured way to really make things, take things out of my control about how things were, and to be able to have the space and the quiet mind to really notice what my mind is actually doing in those situations. Like Dogen says, it's to study the self, and there it is. To study the ways, to study the self. So I don't know if any of that sounds familiar to you, or if I'm really the only one, if everybody else is totally blissed out, from the start to the end. It's a little bit like being on a Caribbean island on the street with a soft breeze. Maybe that's what it's like for you. I don't know. Maybe that would be interesting. Maybe that would be interesting and wonderful too. But for me, more often what happens is I may think, oh, I should not have gotten angry. Right? When I sort of notice the grumbling inside. Maybe there's sort of, that second voice, that second arrow that says, oh, bad Zen student, this is really not a practice for you. You're clearly failing, clearly failing. Again, depending on, and then to have the space to notice and catch that. Or this is also where I think liturgy practice is great, because it provides just enough interaction to allow things to be visible that might not usually come out. So something that has been helpful for me in that context was is a koan in the Book of Serenity. It's case 56, called The Rabbit. That has been helpful for me. So I'm offering it in case it may be helpful for you. The case. As Dongshan and his spiritual uncle Mi were walking along, they saw a white rabbit run by in front of them. Mi said, "Swift." Dongshan said, "How?" Mi said, "It's like a commoner being made a prime minister." Dongshan said, "Such a venerable old person still says such words?" Mi said, "Then what about you?" Dongshan said, "Generations of nobility, temporarily fallen into poverty." So Dongshan and his spiritual uncle Mi were walking along. So spiritual uncle Mi, it's like, this is someone who has practiced for a while. They've been on the path together. And they see this white rabbit running in front of them, and Mi says, "Swift." And when I think of a rabbit, it's like it runs like this, like this, like this. It sort of turns corners and runs fast and runs in a way that is sort of unpredictable, going here and there, not just going in a straight line. Again, probably to help confuse the buzzards and the eagles that are going to go after the rabbit. And when I sit down and notice what my mind is doing, that feels very much like that rabbit. It's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Including every now and then saying, oh, wow, all this anger, wow, where did that come from? Isn't that interesting? Yeah. It's like a commoner being made prime minister. This. And then there's like, oh, this is what I'm doing. Wow, look at that. Isn't that, whoa, whoa. Take a breath, take a breath, take a breath. It's like a commoner being made a prime minister. It's like, most of the time I'm confused and deluded and angry and upset. And every now and then I can see that I'm deluded, angry, and upset. Yeah. The prime minister and the commoner. So, there's something to what Uncle Mi is saying here when I look into my own experience. And Dongshan, interestingly enough, doesn't say, oh, yeah. No, he said, well, such a venerable old person still says such words? And I love these kind of questions, right? It's like I sort of have a sense of something, and then there comes a question where it's like, huh, where again I'm sort of stunned into a moment of stopping and actually looking and listening to what's actually happening, what's actually here. So Dongshan said, such a venerable old person still says such words, but me just says, oh, then what about you? You know? I might have felt like, oh my God, oh, the teacher says, I did it all wrong. Oh, I said, oh, this is terrible. I'm the worst Zen person ever. Right? Is also what Uncle Me could have said. But it looks like he turns right around, um, no defensiveness, and says, oh, then what about you? You know, a chance to listen, to learn, to be curious. Like, oh, maybe I've only seen 80% of it. And Dongshan says, generations of nobility temporarily fallen into poverty. It's a very different perspective on the mind going like this, right? It's like, I'm really this, and I really want to be just the moment when it's like, ah. But maybe this moment of being able to open up and see what is actually going on is actually truly who we are, who I am, always available. And it's our birthright. It's not something that we need to create or cook up or acquire or buy or purchase or be given by a teacher. It's our birthright. It's what's here, even though we may miss it some of the time, most of the time, almost all of the time. Generations of nobility temporarily fallen into poverty. It feels hard to believe for myself. Is it really true that all I need in this moment is actually here? It's an inspiration, something to consider, something to explore, something to notice and see when I really think of myself as a commoner, and I really, 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 really believe that. Generations of nobility temporarily fallen into poverty. And so I think in a similar way, on retreat or in our practice, it's not just going into the dark. There's also something about going into the dark and seeing it bloom and sing in a way that really reveals the light that is right here. And I think this time of year with the solstice and with Hanukkah, the miracle of the light, entering into the dark, and the dark also shifting into light again. As Roger, my partner, reminded me this morning and said, oh, today is longer than yesterday. The daylight, more daylight, all of 6 seconds more. Yeah? All of 6 seconds more. Poco a poco. And it reminds me of Mary Oliver's poem. You may know it. The Buddha's Last Instructions. Make of yourself a light, said the Buddha before he died. I think of this every morning as the East begins to tear off its many clouds of darkness, to send up the first signal, a white fan streaked with pink and violet, even green. An old man, he lay down between 2 sala trees, and he might have said anything, knowing that it was his final hour. The light burns upward, it thickens and settles over the fields. Around him, the villagers gathered and stretched forward to listen. Even before the sun itself hangs disattached in the blue air, I am touched everywhere by its ocean of yellow waves. No doubt he thought of everything that had happened in his difficult life. And then I feel the sun itself as it blazes over the hills like a million flowers on fire. Clearly, I'm not needed. Yet I feel myself turning into something of inexplicable value. Clearly, I'm not needed. Yet I feel myself turning into something of inexplicable value. Slowly, beneath the branches, he raised his head. He looked into the faces of that frightened crowd. I love that poem. Clearly, I'm not needed, yet I feel myself turning into something of inexplicable value. And also the reminder at the end that the reason why we lower our eyes and lower our gaze during the sesshin, or during retreat, or during Zazen, is, I think as Ankyo Roshi once said, it is so that when we raise our eyes again, we look at the world with different eyes. And what we may see is like the last line that she says. He looked into the faces of that frightened crowd. And we're not alone in this. And for me, the retreat is a way to settle and be ready to look up again and to really look into the faces of who is there, what is needed. So I invite you in your own way to find a way to become still and quiet during this time, to go dark, to shine the light inward, to experience being generations of nobility, temporarily fallen into poverty, and to be able to raise your eyes and to look into the faces of who you encounter. Thank you